in the house on Christmas morning day, depending on where you're at. Here's the old stuff over here. I thought that I would throw together a video pulling out all the baits that you wish you would have got this year for Christmas if you don't already have. The baits you will want to get and get in your box before. Oh, one's out of place. Not a creature we're stirring except for you dig it. But anyway, here are pretty much all of the main players I usually start out with or will put in there. But anyway, Merry Christmas, and hopefully you guys have a Happy New Year. I'll probably try to put together another video between now and New Year's, but maybe not. Don't really have a starting point. It depends on what kind of fishing you do. If you're strictly BFS, most of these baits aren't even for you. If you're all kinds of bass fishing, most of these you'll want to use unless you really don't like throwing real small baits. Then the BFS stuff here in the middle and some of these worms probably won't come into play. But I'm going to go through the list on what kind of made me give me the idea for this video is I'm kind of taking the idea of the day box that a lot of bass fishermen use. They, you kind of put together a box for the day you're going fishing. My box turned out into being just a box of like everything I felt I have to have with me when I'm out maybe that day, but it kind of went into weeks and, any given few weeks to a month, even 2 months, a lot of times the same baits will work like all through summer. As soon as that water gets to a certain, warm temp, most of that stuff will just kind of carry through. Colors may change or something. So I'm going to kind of take that box that I already had. I kind of went through it a little bit, but I've realized I have some of these baits that I like to have with me just to try to fit them in one of these boxes. And then you can mix and match, play around with what you take in and out of those kind of boxes. But then I still have my tackle boxes that if I'm going like by myself, I just load everything up. If I'm going and I'm limited on space, I may just take a few of those, not all of my stuff and this box. That way I can be covered if I know I'm going to go be hitting areas where there may be some big fish. Then I may take along my swim bait box, but like if I'm going to a little, you would not take this box to a little creek or stream, or, very small, just places if you already know the bass. Like I'll use Pogue, for instance. I wouldn't even mess with having to worry about taking that box. There's not a big bass bite. And so what I'm doing now is going to go through there and show you some of the stuff that's here is already in here in multiples and different stuff, but I pulled everything pretty much out that I could think of, and I might be missing a few types of jigs and stuff and hooks that I would use for soft plastics, but maybe a couple soft plastics I'm out of right at the moment. But this is pretty much it. Like if you can't go out and fish and catch a bass with one of these baits. Now I know there's a lot of stuff I've kind of gone away from, but you're probably not doing it right. So I guess let me set this out of the way. Let's get started. And if you had to, I'm looking at this going, you guys probably know me since I love chatterbaits. If I had to pick one bait, like just to go out and catch a bass fish, unless it was, winter, like 40, I guess, yeah, let's just say if it like cold wintertime conditions, it would be this bait. This bait it can catch him on certain days when the temperature or certain whatever, but a black and blue chatterbait, period. But especially for me, if you guys follow the channel just years ago when I first accidentally tried one with the gold blade, I still feel the gold blade, just for whatever reason, kind of outperforms it. And this is one of the jackhammer knockoffs, but pretty much any chatterbait in a black and blue color, half, 3/8, even in some of these small, I don't know if I left a small chatterbait out, like one of those flashback minnows, but just that something about a black and blue, just flat catches fish. I would also put this maybe close to it in that smaller one, the Mini Max, especially that color. works, but I filled those two. If I had to, like, you're going to go out and funnest to fish with but catches fish would probably be that. If you put me out and said I just need to catch a bass, period, in any kind of conditions, I'll be honest, it would probably be either of these on a some sort of shaky head. This is the VMC finesse rugby jig, but some sort of a shaky head with 1 or 2 worms. Either just a Z-Man finesse worms, is skinny, or this one's a worn out one, but the Zinkers and a Z-Man, probably a similar color in either or. These 2 baits, you can fish them multiple different ways. You can actually rig up a fresh Zinkers, throw it on a jig head like that, and you can actually work it very fast and erratic, almost like a soft jerk bait. So for reaction, or you can just slow it down and drag it, or so many different uses. That if I had to catch a fish, soft plastic type thing, there's just no for me, there's no other bait that I would pick. One of the and either of those really, I think on I think this typically gets smaller bites once you step up to a little bit, and it's not even longer, it's actually shorter, but just a bigger profile in the water, doing more typically. The bigger one tends to get about as many, but bigger fish in my opinion. That's why I'll try to start with it. And then you can always a TRD is always a good choice, or just take one of your once these wear out a little bit and the salt falls out of them, they actually start getting real buoyant, just like what the TRDs are. Even though they're Zinkers, they come impregnated heavily with salt, but as the salt falls out, they start floating. They will kind of work just pretty much like a Cinco, new out of the package. It does not take long, a couple fish catches or something, and they start doing, they sink way less. That way you kind of need like either a weighted wacky hook setup or something like that to keep them like a Cinco. But they're one of the most versatile worms you can have for that reason. If you guys watch the videos, you can actually, as they wear in, you can pull them above water and stretch them and let them go. They actually get more air, so they're more buoyant. Or you can hold them underwater and pull them a few times, let them stretch. Make sure you get all the areas, leaving them underwater while you're doing that, and they'll actually get more of the ability to sink down. So you can actually, it's the only worm I found you can sort of, not only with just adding a different weight to the jig head itself, you can actually change the buoyancy just by how you're stretching that underwater on these. None of the others, Z-Man, unless they have salt in them, any of those Elastec type baits, they're just going to stretch and stretch or not. But with the Zinkers, with the salt impregnated, have so many holes in there once the salt falls out and they lose that weight, that you can't get them as heavy as you could with the salt in them, because it's just going to be water. But you can still get them to, change how they kind of work in underwater. So it's a pretty good deal if you just kind of tinker with that out, playing around. Because if you guys have seen the videos, you can be out there fishing with the 16th ounce, and they will literally get so buoyant that the 16th ounce won't let it sink all the way. It'll sit there with the tail up, dinking out of the water. It won't even go down. So you'll hold it underwater, give it a few stretches underwater, and then cast it out, and then it'll go back to having a sink sort of like you want. And then if it's to the point where you're like, I think I need to be back on bottom, then don't throw that worm away. Take it off, put it back in your bag of these, put a new one on to get right back to sort of like what a Cinco would do, or back onto full on bottom. If you're really working on bottom, if you're working on bottom slow, you might be better off to be throwing one of these finesse worms. So anyway, that's a long talk on just the worms, but those are very good. And then I'm going to go one more or two more soft plastics, then we'll go to all the hard bait type stuff. But these are, and you can do it with the any of the Kitech baits, but these are knockoffs. These are the Meredith baits from AliExpress, so they're a lot cheaper. But that color specifically goes well with a lot of different baits. You could put one on one of these Chatterbait. Stuck my thumb. That would go good, and they make different sizes on one of these Chatterbaits. But And I've got one I'll show you here on the spinnerbait, which matches the color almost perfectly. And these are just awesome little minnow baits that work very well. And it'll still swim, even though this one's been setting somewhere long enough. It's got a little kink in the tail. It'll still swim real well. And I've had these are probably 2-3 years old now. But then the best trailer for me that I found for these chatterbaits are that the baby Rage Menace, the regular Rage Menace if you're looking for bigger profile, but that peanut butter purple and gold is my favorite color. But any of the baby Rage Menaces, and there's that I forget the exact name of that color, but the blue colored one, those are my favorite for chatterbaits. But you can use them on other stuff. You could also use the Z-Man goats, but those are my favorite, and they just work. So I'll finish off. We did the chatterbaits. I'll do buzz baits. That's the Guggen, but buzz baits. My favorite thing about a buzz bait is the old school ones. I feel are just, for me, I have better luck. They tend to squawk more. You need to make sure that's secured, but you want the ones where the shaft runs right through the middle and the blade's bent to where it runs through, and there's more, these not so much as the old school ones, a chance of that just more ability to rub going on. But the main thing on a buzz bait is you want an aluminum blade with that, and this one's starting to move. I need to squeeze it again with a pair of pliers. But you can do it real simply. Several different ways. Regular pair of pliers, a pair of something like these, and you just want to squeeze that thing to where it doesn't move, to where when that moves on it, it'll get kind of worn into where it kind of creates a squeak. But that has been a definite bait that works once you get it adjusted. The Guggens, I don't know if I'd truly recommend them, but more or less just a 1/2 ounce buzz bait, white and chartreuse. Actually, the black with this gold blade was working, but I prefer, like, if I had my all-time, for me, this is just in the last couple years, would be a white with some chartreuse on it, buzz bait with just a blade like this, but just in a silver color blade. And we've talked about the chatterbaits, but then spinnerbaits, the Megabass makes this one. This is a knockoff of it. You can get on AliExpress. You can still get these. Some baits kind of come and go on AliExpress and they're hard to get, but this one can still be picked up for like $3 to $4. And that little spinnerbait is very much. But for me, any of the, I call them the almost finesse, just smaller spinner baits. I don't like the real big ones. I definitely don't like ones if the blade hangs too far to the back. I feel you'll lose more fish because of that. And then that's why you see a lot of guys saying you need to run a trailer hook on a spinner bait. Just more of a chance for hookups. But I like to run these if you have some sort of, you can run just like a, you guys probably remember, I think Mans used to make, and it probably still does, those just the little tails that run behind a spinner bait. Or I started experimenting with this guy, and for a reason I tried to angle to see if I could get that paddle down if it was doing more, and I don't know if I'm probably ought to rig it back up. So there's pretty much the skirted type stuff. The last guy here on my jigs, I kind of like just a finesse jig, and I'll be honest, I'm not, I've got a few select here and there, but as far as just a day in and day out one, I like the cheap ones. I like to have no fear that I'm just putting on whatever sort of trailer and I'm throwing this anywhere and not worried if it were to get hung up and I don't get it back, which those are the ones from Roger Sporting Goods. They're pretty good about not getting hung up and still hooking fish good, and they're not a real heavy wire, so you can like I like my roughly drag setting of like what a 15-pound line would break at, but I typically use like 20-pound braid to either 15 to sometimes even a 20-pound leader, but throw that on like the Super Destroyer, And you could also fish this with, you could probably get away with maybe down to the blade, but you probably need more of a medium heavy the minute you're throwing a jig with the regular size, just for as much stuff as you're going to have to get through to get the jig to hook on a, even though this is a finesse one. But like the Poison Adrena would be a good one, that medium, 611 medium plus. But the Super Destroyers, where I throw any jig, something like this or bigger, I just started throwing them with the Super Destroyer that I have, which is more like a medium heavy. Length really don't matter, but like a medium heavy rod is what I recommend for most of your jigs, up to a heavy, you know, if you start getting bigger and bigger. But I typically don't go very big on my jigs. It's one of my least favorite ways to fish is with the jig. I like to be using a worm or something like that. So let's start from, I guess, the top and work our way down. I didn't really put these in any order. I didn't have these in any kind of order. So let's just start with a bait that I still recommend you pick up. These are so cheap and they're fun to use, and you kind of can work them almost like a topwater. So let me start topwater first. Hey, look out. Look out, boys and girls. It's getting crazy up here. Hang on. We had a Christmas tornado blow through here. So this guy right here, and the reason I don't have a smaller whopper plopper is because I feel that size, that big whopper plopper is what kind of started the whole whopper plopper craze, and they make smaller ones now. I even have like down to the smallest 60. I even have some of the BFS ones. But if you want the true adventure of a whopper plopper, and you need a pretty stout rod, almost all of my bigger rods will have the capabilities, because these are awesome hooks and they're sharp. But like I've even thrown this bait with the Kind Teton just to prove myself I could do it and catch fish with it. But definitely like a medium heavy, even to a heavy, like a perfect rod, and especially if you know you're going to be on some big fish, would be the Tequila Baccarat. But I can also, Super Destroyer, awesome rod for this. Down to the Poison Adrena, I don't have a problem throwing this bait. Starting to get on a load though with that, and then the blade for sure is overworked. Same thing with the Teton or any other rod. Once you get down past a medium or a light medium heavy, you're wanting a pretty good medium heavy rod, or even stouter for something like this. But that's an awesome bait. So I just recommend having a full size, what I call full size whopper plopper. And then this bait is real close to it. A little bit smaller hooks, a little skinnier. Definitely don't need as hard a hook set. But these little kind of glide style Megabass knockoffs from AliExpress can be had pretty cheap. They've got the little magnets in them also, just like the Megabass. I've ground this one to give it to where I can really, make it work more erratically. But you can kind of just swim them slow. You can glide them around. You can do a lot of different stuff. They don't go real deep, so they're kind of upper end. If you feel like there should be maybe topwater going on, but you're like, man, they just ain't hitting very high up, you might be able to play around with this before you go to some other options. Just see if you can get, aggressive fish that's just a little leery of hitting something right off the surface. So I like those for. They're usually never a go-to. They're just a try it before. I'll get the frog out of the way. That new one from Z-Man, I just like how it walks and it casts real good. And so far, see how it's kind of built smaller and it gets bigger? So it's already tapered down to where it just seems like the hook sets are real good with this too. So I've not had any actual bad luck with it yet. So I kind of put it above my the old Booyah Pop and Pad Crasher for now anyway. And then just on the little thing, so then if these baits up here aren't really working, or if I hit a spot where I just feel there should be a fish and it's still kind of early or getting towards evening, poppers are always good throwing that little spot, or you can kind of walk the Megabass is a very good, the Pop Max is probably it's my favorite. This is actually my favorite color. As you can see how destroyed it is. these things just flat catch fish. But if they're not hitting bigger baits and they're just, you know, your BFS fishing, or they're just not hitting big baits, that little dude right there can catch. I've caught, I want to say 5 pounders, or definitely like 4, close to 5 pounders on that little bait. So then, oh, I left this one out. I didn't even mean to leave that bait out. I was going to pick this one over this color. I'll just put it down. But the Mega Bass on their the Vision 110 plus 1 Junior in the Elegy Bone is my favorite color and jerkbait period at that size. Now, they may not be hitting something this bright on certain days, and then you could go to a little bit more subtle, but I've found that something with this, the touch of chartreuse, and honestly, I've been watching some underwater footage of what people recommend that they think the bass actually can see color-wise. They don't really see the same color spectrum we do. A lot of people say that actually bass just see chartreuse as white. So I don't know for sure, but closer to a natural color, all the way to a natural color. If you're just sure they should be on a jerk bait, but they're not. But they definitely, that Elegy Bone, if they're antsy to hit something on any other jerk bait, they're probably going to get a couple on that one. But if you catch 1 or 2 right off and then they seem to shut down, you may go to a, I don't know if I'd go brighter than this, about as bright as I go, but you definitely could go lighter. Now, if you're fishing real dark, murky water, then yes, maybe like some kind of fire tiger one, whole different deal. But water usually never gets that murky around here. I just kind of jump to those because they're still, even though they're +1, they're still really kind of out, what I call, they're not topwater lure, but they're still kind of that open water baits. There's kind of like, you've got different areas of water, right? You got your top that sometimes you need to be out across tops of color, but other times, you guys know as well as me, you can just be throwing a topwater out in what seems like in the middle of nowhere. Same thing kind of with the jerk bait. You're getting down like a regular Vision 110 is going to be higher up, and these do get deeper, but you still don't have to be super close to bottom a lot of times just to get them to come all the way up and hit one of these. That's why I kind of have those to where if I don't feel they're holding close to cover, like where I would need a Squarebill or something similar, or bouncing off bottom with something like this, or getting kind of close, you know, running it right by them to make them come out and get it. That's where I'll, stuff like this, or the worms and the jigs and all that kind of stuff. So, let's get this one out of the way, because everybody's probably got a favorite. If you fish for very long, you probably end up with the favorite rattle trap, style, size, maybe even a couple colors. But this color, Toledo Gold, in that 3/4 ounce Booyah Hard Knocker, I still yet to find a thing that actually beats it for my all-around, just when I decide to pick up rattle traps and try them. Now, you can get the pearly, the ghosty white ones. Colors will work way better than these at times, but just day in and day out, especially in the winter, that one seems to work. So that's why I recommend it. But the LV 500 is the only thing I've seen can actually, I consider, does beat this probably when you're doing that cold winter, jerking them off the bottom and dropping them kind of thing. I've got a couple in my box, but just throwing this out and bringing it back, that's my favorite. It's not very expensive, and it gets the job done. Let's do the Jabberjaw is one of those that I feel it's weird. It's like if a small Squarebill isn't working that good and a rattle trap's not really working that good, this guy will kick in and light them up. And I don't know why. And there's times where it could be either or whatever will work. But the Jabberjaw, especially in that color, I would recommend. If you've never had a Jabberjaw or never tried that color, at least get one. The shorter build one, they do have one. I've got a couple of those too. The longer build gets a little deeper, but that guy right there has just got a place in my box. Just because of the few days I've had when everything seemed a little off, and I threw that out and it just kicked in. Worth having. And then this one, I just talked, it's there, the dig it. You can't get them anymore, so I'm going to kind of bypass it. I've kind of bypassed the dig it, not really with one bait, but with two. With the, you can still get these per barrels. I don't know about this exact color, but these little bitty Squarebills off AliExpress for just a couple bucks. Well worth the money, catch fish. I don't know if they catch them as well as the Dig It, but right there, very close. They're a little bit touch smaller. I don't think they go quite as deep, but they work good. But then you've got these ATVs, the 1.0s. I keep getting hung up on that Dig It, around that Jabberjaw. But the ATVs and the 1.0s so far are the best. They catch fish and they go right through cover. I don't know if one's better than the other about getting through the wood, but they both just go right over. Like what I want a Squarebill to do. I want to be able to throw a Squarebill in and around the nastiest of stuff and have it still come through any of that wood stuff. And this one does it. This one's done it for years. I've had it. And then this one, I've had it not as long as these guys, but it seems like it's right there with them. And it catches fish. Because I have had some other Squarebills. They seem like they go through cover good, but then you just never get bit. And you're like, what's wrong with that thing? It's just not working right. But those are kind of with those four, I don't feel I need any other Squarebill other than I think I'm going to get some of the 1.5s. I've got 2.5s and various Strike King, and I still keep them around, but like day in and day out when I'm out fishing, it's usually one of those four we'll get on a awesome bite with over all those other baits. So I guess all that's left is the BFS stuff, right? I finally tracked this guy down. I'd had a hard time. I found that bait and then I couldn't find it again on AliExpress. I finally found it again. They're like $2 or $3. That's probably my favorite of that very little BFS-y type jerk bait, crank type deal. That thing just does work very well. And then you guys remember Dr. Frankenstein. They make a bunch of different colors on this guy for sure. There's quite a few colors in this one, but you got to be careful to get that exact profile on that bait. But the Dr. Frankenstein, he only downside to this guy is he's not a big fish producer. I mean, I'm not saying he never will, but like I feel if I throw that, I know it's a lot bigger, but a chance of a big bass jumping on that compared to the little dude is like one of the reasons why I'll try to throw all these other Squarebills before I resort to this. But for like, you're already going to small waters and can catch big fish. I think I've caught a few decent, so I don't know how big, but there's always, you know, those kind of baits you just have confidence, like you never know when you're going to, rattle trap's just going to pull in a big one. Almost any jerk bait, you just never know when it's going to have a big one. And then these little bitty Squarebills, they're awesome at catching just numbers and getting through the wood, and then they will pull in some big, especially the Jabberjaw will pick up. Like I think it like turns on a bite on its own kind of deal. So I think I've covered everything. And most of these you're looking at is in that color. This is their, I think they copied the exact same name of the color. It's the color, the Oyster from Strike King, and they call it Oyster 2 from Bill Lewis. But I like that color. It looks good to me, and fish hit it pretty good, seems like. I like the color of, I can't remember the name of it. I always called it Zombie. The color this comes in their kind of bone color is I forget the actual name, but I feel it's not the best color of like a whitish, bonish color. I think there are some other companies. I think that the lure action works awesome, but I think the Booyah color is a little off from some others. White other baits tend to be just as good once you start getting white, whether it be an original Rattle Trap, Red Eye Shad. Some of their whites are as good or superior. So anyway, I guess I should be wrapping this video up. If you have any questions, or I know there's like you're not seeing, I do throw them. you're not seeing any kind of a drop shot setup, but I do throw different stuff on drop shots and different baits with the drop shot. I just don't do it that much. I try to make this like finesse worms, shaky head, something work. Swim baits I didn't really put in here. I do throw a lot of different stuff we've been playing with, whether it be just these rigged up on a different thing or the actual spark shad, different ones. But those are kind of it does make a difference. But so far I'm finding out really if you use something Megabass or a Megabass knockoff or a Keytech or a Keytech knockoff, they've kind of got the game covered when it comes to that. There's a Largo shed. There's some other ones that come in. I don't really use. I have an A rig. I think Matt gave me one. I've used it a time or two. I'm not real big fan of throwing A rigs. They do have a smaller one out now that I've seen. I think I watched it on. I think it was a hookup tackle. I saw theirs. I know Tactical Bassin came out with one that's pretty small, but I think there's even a smaller one out. And I've tried the ones in the past with like the 3 wires, and they're little ones, or they're just a few small wires with one main bait kind of thing. I'm not a fan of those. I don't know if I'm just never fished them right, fished them long enough to get used to them. But I feel if you're out there and I don't know, I figure I can cover water better and catch them better, like either rattle trap down lower or just out in the middle of nowhere, seeing what's out there with some sort of. I've got a ton of different jerk baits that I will try it various times if I just see fish out there. But anyway, any questions, drop below. Thanks for watching. Merry Christmas, and I got to get out of here.